been around for just about a year. You know what I mean? With your in-laws?
I do.
Yeah, they kick my foot.
Even my mom, I love her, but like, that's 600 miles.
Don't worry about it.
Or he was on that. He plays like wingman.
Yeah. My mom used to say the right phrases to kill me on Sunday, that's why I don't join. Last minute stuff too, where I'm like, really, you're gonna throw this at me now?
I had kids. Something was going on, I just remember with the ice. And she said, "Long brother." Go right easier.
And then he says,
I don't have to breathe it. So you come to the break? Yeah.
Are we, like, is there a thing where we get to go around? Or are we just going to, cause I was looking to see, for West Library.
Is that me that?
Yes.
Oh,
I think they were just.
Oh, yeah, okay. Just not time to see for his birthday party.
For right now, just keep it as is.
It wraps up on tree lighting at 4. Motion to set. And it'll be,
Because we did.
and then just basically. It's a gym built for training for that, yeah, she's been going there for a long time.
Oh, she's the coolest kid I've ever met.
Yeah, she's so strong.
Especially.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
people that opened up this branch, they competed up in their That's great, because on Wednesdays, I'm the one that don't take
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I have one of those in family.
They were both working.
Yep.
And I would go sneak into these camp.
What time is it?
Okay.
Gotta hit it yet.
Still just.
You'll be fine.
Dog license. Dog park pig. Number 6 at the dog park.
Farmers market.
Maybe like cheese. Yeah. One day
That
late.
really takes advantage.
I mean, it's already better than it was earlier.
All right, we'll call Public Works to order. All 5 members are present, and I might note we have 4 people from Public Works. We have Sarah, Carl, and Tim, and Dave Webking, the director. So the matter tonight before us is item 1, ordinance 2024-0043, ordinance to consolidate and update refuse, recycling, and yard waste laws. And I will open it up to guessing Dave right away, you wanna start?
Sure. What I'd like to do is give the committee members a follow-up with the information request that was requested at the last common council meeting. There's a request for identification of the type of injuries that was sustained in sanitation. Some of these could be at the drop-off site, but most are during the collection of either refuse or recycling materials. Struck by, you can see it's one strain is a little bit more frequent, slip, trips and falls, getting out of the vehicle, refuse packer, recycling packer, walking to the point of collection. We've had slip, trips and falls. Since then, I believe 3 years ago, we've purchased these spikes that you can put over shoes that help prevent further occurrences. Lacerations, and again, that's a little bit over 5 years of all these injuries. We had 2 fractures, whether it be a finger or what have you. Foreign object, you're looking at debris, usually in the eye exposure. The exposures, that could be anywhere from fire extinguisher spray, which we just had, were unknown or unbeknownst to us that when the person went to service the container and they serviced the refuse packer, the fire extinguisher exploded and kind of exposed the employee. Caught in between is just kind of compressed between the person and an object. So that could be maybe pinch fingers, could be maybe a body, you're going in between the cart and the truck. So I want to thank our risk manager, Wendy Schultz. She provided this very quickly for us. You can see here the monetary exposure for the city, for the exposure, that foreign object, the type of injuries that are sustained by the crews. Again, slip, trips, and falls is a major one, as well as strains. So what's a strain? That could be back, it could be reaching for an object or a material, piece of material. So it's kind of a multiple amount of things that are classified. Any questions? So the second request was how much material is stored outside a refuse packer and or recycling collection. So the last common council meeting, we started this when the request was, so the common council meeting was a Tuesday. We started, I believe, on the 21st. And we went through and we did 5 days of refuse collection. And because, again, the curveball was a holiday collection, right? So these numbers may have been increased or impacted a little bit more. But we can further evaluate if you so choose for the normal collection. But these are the percentages that we are seeing during that collection week, that time period. So you can kind of see in the eastern side, you can see that there's an increase, northeast section, and as well as the northwest section. Recycling, just because we only did 5 days, right? In order to collect for this meeting, we didn't even count for the red week. So we have 2 collection cycles. The black week was evaluated, and these are the percentages that the crew's seen. Now you'll see some areas there that have no numbers. Those are the red weeks because we did that thereafter. Again, this is something, if you need more information, we can kind of keep doing this and provide those percentages for you. This here is the numbers. What's kind of neat about this is the number of properties that are collected throughout the city. Now, again, I apologize, the dates through GIS, it was kind of not in an orderly fashion. So the two graphs, left one is for refuse, so that kind of shows you the number of living units that are serviced. Those are the actual numbers within that total, and it gives you the percentages for that day. That collection date is listed on the left. Recycling, same principle for those dates. For the black collection, those are the ones, as well as some red that went into a holiday partial week. Shows you the number of properties, but as well as the number of uncontained items that were within the containers or containers. On the right, kind of has a blue ribbon there. It kind of shows you average for that week. Compiles the percentage, for a Monday route. All 5 routes that's your average at 6%. Tuesday, 5 routes, that's your average, as well as recycling. 1 route is 8%, so on and so forth. So there was a little bit of discussion about how do we enforce the enforcement. So I just want to give a quick review of our citations. The citations that go to the owner of the property. So if you have a tenant facility, it doesn't go to the tenant, where you're actually sending that on to the owner of the property. In 2023, Sanitation Division had 72 that were issued. In 2024, currently there's 42 citations issued. Now, we don't know what goes on after that. We issue them just like a speeding ticket. We don't know where it ends up or how it's dealt with. Violations, this is where there's communication between the crew and the supervisor and or a lead person. They indicate that there are concerns. In doing that, the supervisor or lead person will follow up. Given it could be containment issues, it could be material issue, it could be not at the point of collection, either at the curb or the alley edge, so on and so forth. So in 2022, there were 629 violations that were submitted, as well as 2023, 925 or so. Now, so one option is issuing citations. It does take time, but again, you're leaving the material there, and so it's at that location. Takes time to process, administer, so on and so forth. Now, if we go to the violation, that's our other mode of communication of the right and wrongs. So staff has indicated, here's a piece of paper. Here's your violation. If it's easily observed that there's bags of trash and it's all over, we collect it right away and we bill that resident owner right away. And that usually goes on their tax bill. And we communicate as well to the owner. Another, and Kale has kind of blended this into the new ordinance, is bulk collections. We need, let's deal with the problem right away. Where we see items that are outside the container, they're more than 1 cubic yard, so therefore right now, 1 to 4 cubic yards or 4 to 8, we would go ahead in the future, hopefully take a picture, assess a fee, and then go ahead and contact the owner of the property. So bulk payments are, in a way, another option of citations and violations. So when you see these bulk payments, they either are requested by the patron or the tenant, or it's the supervisor or lead person saying, ooh, they're driving that route for that day and they're seeing that there's a mess. So they're saying, hey, you know what, we got to deal with this today. and we just go ahead and clean it up and we assess a bulk collection. Now, how much is the bulk collection? It's 1 to 4 cubic yards is $50, and then 4 to 8 is $100. So in contrast, citations, help me out, guys, is it?
124 refuse and 187 recycle.
So it's kind of which direction you want to go, what's the most efficient, so to speak. As long as we're there, we might as well just take care of it, and I think Kayla's addressing that.
I'll jump in and say too, the citation amounts you heard are not completely city money, so a citation for $186, $7, I think that's only about $100 comes to the city. Because if it goes to municipal court, there's a bunch of other entities out there that get a share of that money. The state gets some money, the municipal court is assigned some money. So the fee, 100% of that comes to the city. The citation, only a portion of it comes to the city.
That's it. Just any questions or comments?
Kale, do you have anything to add, other than what you just told us about the percentage that we lose out on?
Those are the basics which Dave described. What I was going to do is sign into the screen here so that you could see the current ordinance as it's presented. And also, Alderperson Grisham and I have been working over the last couple of weeks to come up with an alternate version that she wanted to present for some potential amendments. So I'm happy to get right into that if you'd like.
Please.
All right, got this. So right here is the ordinance as it is. And so I'm able to go in there and make edits if you'd like. So we are ready to do that tonight if you'd like. But in the meantime, this is the version that Alderperson Grisham and I have worked on. And I've got some changes in there that I can get right into if you'd like, unless, Suzette, do you have anything you want to get into all first or not?
No, you.
So if you recall, the version as presented right now is a very short rule talking about solid waste must be contained in a receptacle. And if it's not in the city issued receptacle, it's outside, you would be getting a bill for it. There's no other exceptions to it. In this version, it creates a couple exceptions. So one of them would retain that 1 cubic yard in volume outside the container, but the only way that it'd be picked up as part of the service would be if it's contained in no more than 2 actual containers that are both rigid and airtight and can't exceed 75 pounds, so they are liftable. That still is heavy, 75 pounds is a lot for someone who's running a rail all day, but that would be the maximum weight allowed for any container. And then the second one would be an object that's not a food source and also is not exceed 75 pounds. An example of this would be like a broken table or chair or something like that. It's not a place where a rodent would be able to hide in it. It's not something that a rodent would be able to use for food. That would be the other option. That would be still part of the regular collection process without a fee under these proposed amendments. Other than that, the other change from what was originally presented, so if it's improperly presented for collection, that would allow someone, right now, if it's not presented correctly, crew could still pick those things up and bill. Right here, it gives the option to pick up that item, but only if it's a source of food for rodents or shelter. So if it's one of those two things, then you can pick it up and impose the fee. But if it's not going to create that rodent harborage issue, then the crew would simply leave a tag saying that stuff should not be presented in that fashion, and then it'd be the property owner's or occupant's responsibility to remove it from that location and properly dispose of it next time. Same thing with the ineligible solid waste. If it's waste that's presented outside of a container, or if it's waste even in a container that's not supposed to be eligible, then the only time it'd be picked up for a fee would be if it's, again, a rodent harborage issue. Otherwise, it's not a rodent issue, it could be left in place, and then the crews would just leave a tag on it saying dispose of it properly. The final large change in this part would be adding a provision talking about commercial refuse containers. There are commercial refuse containers through the city that are stored on private property, and there are some throughout the city stored on public property. And so when it's on public property, that's generally what Public Works deals with. You go into private property. And all these containers are serviced by commercial vendors and not serviced by Public Works. So part of the issue though is some of these places and some of these containers, I'll go ahead and call them out at about 92nd and National. One of the worst ones, I would say, is that dumpster sits right on National. It's overflowing all the time and the owner doesn't seem to care. That'd be a good example of one that's on private property, that when a crew observes it, they would have the ability to call the company that services that dumpster, tell them that that the city will pay for them to pick it up immediately, and whatever the cost is imposed by that provider would then be placed on the tax rolls as a special charge. I don't want Public Works to enter the private property to do this. It would just be simply calling the provider who's already listed on that container. Plus, is another law that applies when you're on private property, talking about maintenance of property. You'd actually have to, for the first time we do it for a property owner, notify them, and give them an opportunity to correct it before we do it. But notify them that any future infractions like this, you'll simply call that provider and request immediate pickup for whatever the fee would be at that time, which might be a lot higher than the regular collection amount. So that is an option that was added to this draft. And if it's on public property, then that law doesn't apply as far as I'm concerned, because it's not what it's meant for. So we could go ahead and call that servicing company to remove anything in the dumpster or anything causing the dumpster lid to lift up. Again, a rat harborage issue and a rodent attractant issue, and they would be able to service at that time. I don't believe Public Works has the type of trucks that'd be necessary to even service these things, which is another reason why it's necessary to call the listed contractor. They do it all the time. They have the equipment. They have a billing schedule. We're just simply going to pass the bill on to the property owner. So those are the primary changes. I don't believe we had anything else.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Alder.
Thank you, Kale. One of the reasons I reached out to Kale, and this is obviously the meeting went pretty long last time, and I was trying to really take into consideration maybe what Mayor Devine's initiative was and how it was being conveyed by Public Works. And one of the key things that we all talked about and have a great investment is getting this rodent issue under control within the city. And we know that there's multiple issues and it is people driven. Garbage is a big key to it. So when talking with Kale about this and also Dave Webking, if we were to have any items outside of the garbage as to what Kale spoke to, none of them should ever be perishable items. That is a food source. I don't think a table, a bookcase, a chair, I understand it was explained, upholstery, but we're talking about items that we put out the day before collection. Any items that are out on the street otherwise aren't allowed to be anyhow. So we have that remedy in place already. So that was the biggest goal in kind of breaking this other ordinance down and saying, okay, what really is a rodent source and what is really an issue? I was surprised, Dave, with the numbers that came back. I don't feel they're that extreme, 5 to 10%, talking about 1 in 10 houses out, that items may be out. And part of the data that you put out there didn't really specify, was it perishables? Was it a small item? Was it a bulk item?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So given the, I guess, the type of materials, the bags, that sort of thing, I indicated don't rip the bags up.
To find out.
So if there's black bags, white bags, you cannot see the contents that are within the bag. We just presume that it's perishable. And if this is passed, that's what we would assume, that any bag would be perishable. because I don't want the crews, and I guess when I was a supervisor too back in that time, and feel free. There's glass, I just spoke with Carl here not too long ago, that there's hypodermic needles still. Yep, so that's why we wanna get the bags in the container, that's where they should be. And like you said, if you have those type of, I think, furniture or what have you, that's easily can be defined in the ordinance, yep, that's fine, we can go ahead, as a bulk or what have you, but we're seeing more and more where it's expanded to that, and it's, by the time they address it as a bulk collection, or they're still being exposed to it. And
Yeah,
Good
I would
point.
agree. So anything that would, a bag mixed, you don't know what is in it, is gonna be collected, and that would be fee-based.
Under the proposed amendment,
Yes.
yes, because it would not be a rigid container.
Exactly, so, and just to clarify, any furniture cannot be put in a container, it's obviously, we see that it's furniture, it's a chair. But when we were discussing bulk item issues, and this kind of speaks to injury and other things, what I see and what I hear a lot from my constituents is, what will the city take? And because we've put things out for years, even if they're not really allowed and they've been taken because it's easier to take than to leave behind, people take their chances. And I think if we were really clear on that language and clear on the consequence of it, it may be messy at first to say, hey, we're not picking up that couch and it's gonna have to sit there, and we do have to send a supervisor back out to address this issue. But if we put bulk items in that grouping too, such as, and it could go anywhere from what you said, Dave, a piano, an organ, those huge items that really are an issue. But that, I don't know if that's getting too far in the weeds, or that would be too much language, but I really wanna try to meet your goal as to what's helping the DPW, to have the best efficiency too.
so you're right, clarification, so that way the patrons know. Yes, black and white kind of, so they know what direction they need to go. And I guess given the ordinance the way I understand it, the Public Works Department as well as the committee here can dictate that and indicate that, what do you want us to take construction material? Is that something that you just, I was just informed tonight that City of Milwaukee, they do not take construction material at all. We do, as long as the nails are pounded down and the links, and it's bundled. But that's something, I guess, getting back to your question, Alderperson Grisham, is now we have the opportunity to change, to make it more clear. Now, again, to try to cover all the materials that potentially could be set out there, like white goods, dryers and that sort of thing, that's already addressed. But to get, if you have 2 chairs out there, the size of the chair is gonna have to be evaluated, but you may, the way the ordinance is now, we would collect one, and then the second recliner would be a charge. But again, what we're trying to do is increase efficiency, and to reduce the exposure to the individuals. We have pictures here, hopefully I can share, but it's at times can be very, wow. Now, for the most part, it's good. Seriously, it's really good, but for every now and then, a patron that the crews, Carl, Toby, Sarah, and Tim, they get to know the people. They know that, hey, they have this amount, elderly person, if that person has a bag right now, they're currently taking that. Because, wow, usually that person doesn't have that amount of garbage, must have, whatever. But, so we try to work, but with this, it would be more clear. Instead of having the potential 1 cubic yard to be set outside, like you said, it could be perishable, it's not clear. We define that, I think it would help, but I think patrons There's certain residences that when I drive by, it's the same ones where, hey, you have 2 garbage cans and they still are maxed out. There's some on the outside the container, we need to take it further, we need to address it in some way, but
Attorney Decker.
Sorry. So sort of to help the committee decide where it wants to go with this, I would call the amendments proposed by Alderperson Grisham as the Rat Harborage focused amendments. That's really what it does, is it focuses the enforcement techniques from the original specifically on rat harborage issues, but tries to avoid it for other things that are not rat harborage issues. So it takes a much more precise approach if that's their primary issue. But also by creating exceptions like this, it will make it more administratively burdensome for public works crews on the ground. They're gonna have to make judgment calls based on what is a rat food source or shelter source. That's gonna make it a little more difficult for the crews. It'll make potentially more appeals come through, which is the Administrative Appeal Review Board would have to make decisions on. And it would reduce likely the amount of fees that are gonna be recovered because more things are gonna qualify for free pickup outside of the container as a result of the amendments into this section. So it's really the council and the committee's decision on where do you place the emphasis here? If the emphasis is maximum services, trying to attack rat harborages, then this is probably the best thing you could do. If it's rat harborages plus efficiency plus collecting fees for services and simplicity at the cost of billing a lot more people for the service, then you'd want the original version. So it's pluses and minuses on both sides. This is why everyone here was elected. So you get to make those decisions and decide what's most important for the city.
And the amendment would have where we can call in and have the dumpster pulled.
Correct, yes, and that could always be implemented on this one or the
And
original.
who has to call it in? Could any one of us call it in with a picture and say, go get this?
I would have,
It would be definitely overflowing.
I would certainly assume that you could take a picture and send it to Public Works. We'd want to make sure that there's record keeping within Public Works that call was made.
Right,
So
no, I know we wouldn't be calling Waste Management.
you'd want to forward it to Public Works.
Right, but any Public Works person could, also, a guy putting a street light in could.
So technically, the director would decide who has the authority in the department.
Mr. Chair. Can I say, like, right now, we deal with
The inspector.
the commercial properties with the dumpsters. So
They would
I don't
just-
mind code enforcement calling for that. I just, a lot of the dumpsters that we see 92nd National, they'll be overflowing on a Sunday and Monday. It gets picked up Monday afternoon. That's the issue we'd have. So if we're gonna call, I believe that one's Eagle Disposal, let's say we call them, sometimes it's getting picked up already. So I don't know. And like you're saying, if we can have Sidell on a property, it's kind of the same thing. We're usually a day behind, like, emergency service to get a dumpster cleaned up, is what we see, I guess, with the commercial properties. If it's in the right of way, that's great. If if we can refer to DPW, they can grab something like 83rd in Oklahoma, where, it's out in the walk to curb area, so they can just grab this, if it's a legal dump or a couch or mattress, whatever it is, and build the property owner.
So you were Dave, you would contact.
But code enforcement usually, code enforcement can reach out to the commercial dumpster companies instead of DPW for that.
And Mr. Chair, if I just may emphasize too, the reason I was looking at this is listening to our constituents and their concerns about the rat harborage, and also knowing and recognizing city has to do something a little bit different. I think that piece, adding the commercial properties, is key based on my experience so far in my tenure. And that's working with code enforcement and hearing, patrons who call or residents who call and say, I have a neighbor who is doing this. And I don't think the majority of our taxpayers should pay the price for the percentage of the violators. So if we can target the violators, and I know that we want efficiency and whatnot, but we pay a good amount of taxes in the city. And I sent this in a separate email, but I want it on record. When we tout our city as something that sets our city aside from sister communities, saying we offer these services because our taxes are higher. And now we're just going to be a fee-based service and still have the higher taxes and sister municipalities don't. It doesn't coincide with what I am living in West Dallas for. Part of the reasons are I like my city services. And if you asked me tomorrow, would I pay higher taxes to keep my services or I would reduce my services, I would personally vote for higher taxes. So I'm not looking at doing a tax without taxation type of thing. We do have to look at our budget, and I don't want to get too off the board on this, but I would appreciate if there was support on the second ordinance being more rodent focused, because I really think that's what our residents really want. And they want to know that we're working hard to combat that as well, but they're part of the problem too. So that's all I have.
Mr. Chairman,
Me,
I'm sorry.
okay, go ahead, Alderman.
Okay, I agree with you on that respect, but one of the things I'm looking at, are we pushing this down to another group of people to deal with? Or something that we should be dealing with right now? I mean, I understand that the road thing, I called, they can tell you, I've called many times about this situation. But if it's something that we should deal with now, rather than wait till later, because eventually it's gonna happen. I hope not, but it will.
May I ask you, I'm not understanding kind of what your point is.
What we're doing right now, we're not doing the whole thing that we were talking about, because we want to just deal with just the road. And we should be dealing with the road and the problems with injuries to our people the people that work in DPW. Things like, I don't know if you have a problem I've had in the wintertime going down the alleys, I've seen all this trash and stuff, making it hard for people to drive down the alley because people have these big, huge items out there. So, I mean, are we doing this now to delay what we're eventually going to have to do anyway later on?
I personally would say no, but I don't disagree. That's why I don't disagree with the large items. And that's part of the conversation that I had with Hale and I had with Dave, and we've had collectively. We can steer this, and that's the goal of having this conversation. So as Dave said, do we want to prevent more injury and just say we're not collecting any construction material anymore? We can do that, but it has to be conveyed to the constituents so that they know. And I think just the imbalance that we've had over the years, and it's no fault of Dave or any of the workers, because it is easier to pick up the garbage than to know if you leave it there, it's gonna be a bigger problem. But it also doesn't teach us as the taxpayers to say, hey, you know what? When someone's online and say, can I put a couch out there? And somebody says, yeah, or we're telling them cut it in 3 and put it in your bin 1 week at a time, that's not solving the issue altogether. I mean, say it's gonna be $50. If it's $50 to pick up that couch, so be it.
Mr. Chair?
Let me just get the mayor first, Tim, okay? Mayor, you had something to say, didn't you?
No, but I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this was put forward to deal with the rodents, look down the road for efficiencies, and reduce injuries. And I don't know how anyone's gonna know if their container weighs 75 pounds. Are there scales on the trucks? So I fear that this has the potential to spiral us into administrative chaos. I don't know if we could ask DPW staff to, I mean, I'm glad City Attorney Decker brought up the administrative burden that could come from this with appeals. I mean, we used to get it from tree cuttings and we get plenty from dogs, and I just worry more about a lot more paperwork on an already taxed staff. So I don't know. First, I guess I just want to, I guess my big question is if DPW staff could comment on the potential for the additional administrative burden.
That'd be for Dave.
As far as outside,
As far as someone, I mean, I don't know how a resident is gonna weigh their garbage cart, much less a driver.
so it would be,
And then the appeals, and then and then having to send out staff, and then having to deal with a potential appeal, and say, no, my cart was 74 pounds, and I thought it was 77, and just how,
I think what you would envision is what you see going on now with bulk collection, write-ups and supervisors running out to validate those bulks, seeing if it's a chargeable amount, what size, possibly leaving a violation notice, saying, hey, this is outside of the bulk collection, needs to be cleaned up, uncontained garbage, you have 72 hours or what have you, depending on what the content is. And then having to go recheck it multiple times for compliance. And then eventually sending a crew out if not complied with a violation notice. There's a lot of time involved with that, and I could foresee that occurring with this process as well, administration wise.
and if, Mr. Chair, if I
Go ahead.
if I could, I mean, obviously, each of you can decide to do what you choose to do on this, but I think it's gonna be more efficient and better on all of us if we just keep it simple and don't break it into categories of multiple bullet points. I think that's just gonna muddle things, and if you don't wanna proceed with the initiative that was at our last council meeting, I would just back up and revisit going forward. I think if we should just do all or nothing right now, just to keep it simple, because we wanna present our taxpayers with a very simple, understandable, comprehensive approach. We don't wanna break it into subcategories. I think that's just gonna confuse people even further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Devine, because you hit some points that, I don't weigh my garbage now, but we all know that there's an ordinance that said it can't weigh more than 75 pounds. But yet when you drive around and you see somebody, you wanna know what things weigh. I brought a list of what pretty much everything weighs. A bag of garbage weighs anywhere from 15 to 30 pounds, depending on what you put in it. And if you look at a 96-gallon cart, you can fit about 230 pounds in it. You're not supposed to, but you can. So technically, as Alderman Weigel said, we got this ficus tree here. That's not a rodent issue by any measure, but it would make sense to put outside of a garbage cart because it would be a one-handed boom, it's in the truck. We're gonna cut that in 3, expect our taxpayer to cut that in 3. I'm not gonna cut it in 3, but I'm gonna put it in that garbage cart. My lid isn't gonna close, that's against ordinance. And where am I gonna put my garbage now that I want to put in my refuse container for the week? So what I'm saying is, it doesn't make sense that we're telling our taxpayers that anything outside of the garbage is going to be a $50 fee. So breaking it down in categories that are clear to me would be anything in a garbage bag that's outside of a cart. We don't have to weigh that, it's outside of the cart. That gets taken, there's a fee that's applied to it. Anything that doesn't weigh above 150 pounds by 1 cubic yard, which we already have, is pretty simple, but it doesn't include large things like, we obviously know a couch is not 1 cubic yard, a recliner is heavy. I can tell you by picking up a file cabinet versus picking up a piece of wood, I know that's not gonna exceed that weight limit. So I think we're getting really far in the weeds, and that's a big stretch, Mayor Devine, that we're looking at saying anybody's gonna weigh their garbage. And I think that all of these trained individuals can kind of see, based on all the lifting they've done in their career, what weighs what, and if it really would qualify. Yes, there is more administrative cost to going in, having a supervisor go out, but I think for what we pay for our taxes and the lashing we're gonna take in making this decision on behalf of our taxpayers, I would say, let's not do it at all then. Let's leave it as it is.
Yes,
You in agreement?
on the last sentence.
Yeah,
Let's
leave it as
keep
it
it.
is. Let's just
Yeah.
not visit these other issues as far as injury and rodent issues in a different way.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that stuff.
No, that was it.
Jim Lance has a question or comment.
I just had a comment, with all due respect, Alderwoman Grisham, I have no clue who told you that we instruct residents to cut up couches or a tree or a big item. I've never heard that.
It was in our meeting.
But we do not tell them.
I know you wouldn't, but what I'm saying,
If a
we-
resident did that, kudos to them, they're pretty
Right.
smart. Why, we would not say, we're not taking that, that's a full couch. I
Right.
high five that guy.
no, I'm speaking what was said in meetings that we've had, public meetings.
Okay, because I've heard this several times, like,
Mhm.
one of my staff is saying that to the resident,
Heck
and
no.
having a conversation with me, like, what are you telling them, you know?
Right, and that was a clear point. We
But-
want you to be safe, we certainly
Right,
want
right.
our residents to be safe.
And right, to me, I have 43 employees. If one gets injured a year, that's too many.
Yeah.
We've had 2 this year already that were due to, at least 2, due to bulk collections. Laceration from, of all things, a sofa staple.
Mhm.
Another one, a construction debris pickup with a nail not seen because it was underneath the pile.
Right,
And I think one resulted in sutures and the other, you know, you don't know.
and Mr. Chair, if I may clarify, there's 3 points to this whole ordinance that Hale and I were talking about. A, we're dealing with commercial properties that we weren't able to deal with before, and that will produce results. That will maybe take a little bit, it's not gonna take a little bit more, because we have code enforcement that deals with them already. They're having to deal with calls on that continuously from us and residents. The other component is, if you want to remove bulk pickup, let's list those items. That will take the risk of injury away right there. If you don't want construction material, we'll take that away. Anything outside of the garbage that is in a bag will be taken by fee. Anything that would be within 1 cubic yard, like we were doing before, that could be a ficus tree, or it could be a suitcase, or it could be a smaller item, or maybe a little extra cardboard because we all purchase online. That should not be fee-based. So I think it's pretty clear if we did it that way. And to speak to what I said before, I'm fine with doing nothing and leaving it as it is.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Rebecca.
Kale, we could do the commercial property alone, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Right, I kind of got in front of this. Go ahead.
That's what I was gonna suggest, like keeping the original version, but I do like the idea that, you know, private residences getting checked on their dumpsters, and if we can call those entities and they can pick it up and they can charge the owner of the residence, like, I think that's a pretty solid idea. As far as everything else, like, it's a balance, right? We're trying to future-proof, we want curb appeal, obviously rats are important, but I think the rat issue, it's more than just the garbage piece. I know I've been in this for, you know, not a lot of time, but I've been talking to people about rats. It's all I've been talking about. And it's a process. It's gonna take time. This is just one piece of the puzzle. I don't think all the amendments you're proposing are necessarily going to get us the results that we would actually want. Now, if you told me, or if we had proof that it was gonna be like, oh, we get rid of 75% of the rats by doing it your way, sure, I could get on board with that. But, you know, we're gonna save, you know, insurance premiums on people getting hurt on the job. I don't want people to get hurt at all. So that's kind of where I'm sitting.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, how is them still collecting it for a fee gonna reduce injury?
Yeah, but
Because they're still gonna collect it, they're just gonna get paid for it this time around.
yeah, but that's the cost of doing business. Like, you know, it's a hazardous job. Like,
Right, but you're saying it's gonna reduce injury. How does that reduce injury if people are still going to put this material out there to be collected? Because it's not gonna change necessarily that I still have to throw things away.
true, excuse me, true, but like if they're in approved containers, and yes, not everybody can cut their stuff up, but if we can get towards, you know, training all of us, frankly, like I've been guilty of putting a bunch of garbage that I probably shouldn't have put out. You guys picked up fire ash out of my fire pit years ago. It probably shouldn't have been picked up either.
Definitely should.
I should have been charged for that. So it's also just keeping us accountable. And again, you know, part of the reason why I love and work and live in West Dallas is because it's grown up from the ashes, so to speak. And this is also gonna help with at least, you know, making sure our garbage isn't just like thrown everywhere, cause my alley can get, you know, doesn't look that great sometimes, so.
I don't know, I believe that garbage is being collected already, and people are gonna place that out anyhow. I'm not proposing this as, hey, it's my great idea, I'm trying to supplement what Mayor Devine's initiative is. I'm not being rat focused. This is the 3 primary things that Mayor Devine wanted to focus on. And that component to the refuse being outside of the container, but still being a give and take for us who pay the taxes. And truth be told, this hasn't even been shared with the public. We're gonna say, hey, you should be watching. But once this gets out and you get that phone call and I get that phone call and everybody else does, and Mayor Devine does, Mayor Devine's gonna say, call your alders. Because we're the one who passed it.
Yeah.
And I'm not in favor of the first, only because I think it is too punitive and it's too broad. And we do have to make it more concise to what the average resident is throwing out. Those people that Dave Webking is talking about are violators, continuous violators that do this. And they should be the ones that are being held accountable, and if that takes more administrative costs, so be it. I shouldn't have to pay for that.
Attorney Decker.
So the question was posed about how it helped, and I guess part of the reason that this was originally proposed, from my understanding, was not necessarily to collect fees, but to deter that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be how you reduce injuries, is by people would get that first bill and realize, oh, I better fit it in the cart or drop it off at the drop-off site for free, as opposed to getting a $50 bill from pickup. So ultimately, I think that would be, the goal would be to reduce it. And if what Public Works data is showing is 5 to 10% of the time it's stored outside the container, it means that this ordinance would not affect 90 to 95% of people. Nothing for them would change. It's the 5 to 10% that use the bulk pickup outside the parts would have to then start paying fees. And we're talking about 17,300 properties that need to be serviced every single week. 5 to 10%. Doing my quick math here, 875 to 1,730 instances per week in which you're talking about staff having to pick up those bulk collections 52 times a year. So if you keep that math going, the opportunity for injury is going to be there. Anything we can do to reduce that injury, I think, is helpful. And then finally, the only policy part of this, if you'd like to consider it, is state law does say that the number 1 priority of the state in solid waste management is reduction of the creation of solid waste. Then it's reuse, recycling, and then landfill. So another purpose of this was to give folks an incentive to not produce as much solid waste so that it can fit within the containers that are authorized. So I just wanted to get that out there since it was brought up. Ultimately though, it is the council's decision if you're gonna change anything at all, or if you wanna do something that's been presented.
Mr. Chair. Well, go ahead.
Well, I'll go with you first.
All right.
Then Carl.
Sure. So, yeah, I think there's some very thoughtful discussion here, and a lot of work has been done on this. I would add that I think that we have a rat problem. The best way to resolve a rat problem is to take the garbage and get it away. And what are we doing here? We're looking at finding ways to not pick up garbage. How do people understand whether it's in a solid container, airtight, all of that. But that's part of the amendment. That takes us away from the original proposal. The original proposal is the $50 fee for picking up any items outside of the garbage cart. I've talked with lots of people. I've talked with our fellow council members, and I'm not in a point where I can support the $50 fee in general. And I'm with Alderwoman Grisham, where I'm at a point where we should just keep the status quo, folks. As far as we're looking to try to fix this, we're going to cause more problems. A $50 fee isn't going to make or break the budget at all. If we want to really move forward with a $50 fee for items outside the garbage cart, well, then we should tie that in with automated collection if that comes around. At that point, now's not the time. So with all of that, I move that we place on file item 1 in our agenda, meaning that we maintain the status quo, we make no changes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Aaron Vine.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one quick comment on the injury thing. The photo right here is an example of how that would reduce injuries, because ideally that mess behind the cart would be in their second cart, and the sanitation crews would not have to make multiple trips back and forth from the truck picking these things up that should be enclosed. So that, I just wanted to, because the question was asked, I just wanted to mention that. And it's getting colder and slipperier, so obviously they're not going to be operating in icy conditions every day or even a majority of days, but I just wanted to touch on that one.
Yes.
But that would be a
So-
special pickup either way.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be normal.
Dave Webking,
Sorry to interrupt.
go ahead. No.
So you are correct, this is special pickup. But right here, I just had a discussion with the crews tonight. That is disturbing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we could cite, and I guess I'd have to defer what you guys did on this site or bulk collection put on taxes. But we need something to deter this behavior. This is not acceptable at all, whether we can increase citations or what have you. That's disrespect. Simple. I feel bad for, again, we get paid, thank you for the job and for our crews. But this aesthetically is, as well, but it's just that you see certain homes, they just, and again, a lot of these are probably renters, move outs. But I guess I would ask that we have something in the ordinance that when they have bulk collections, that there has to be some type of containment. Now, I know for a fact, we spoke about this one, this is, hey, it's a mess, just clean it up, get it, because by the time we cite them and the turnaround would be 24, 48 hours, we're not gonna leave it there. So it's a bulk pickup, instead of $120 citation or whatever it is, it's $50. But yet the crews are, they'll clean it up.
And Mr. Chair, speaking to what you said, Dave, what I was saying as a proposed amendment is just that. Anything that's outside that wouldn't constitute maybe a small piece of furniture or like I pointed out the examples. So I'm not saying, oh, just pile your garbage together. Anything that would look like that would be a fee based as it should be, or fitted in your can. I'm not looking to adopt any specific ordinance, but I want to help you. I think ultimately we want to help you in your department deal with this. And if we can, on the legal side, Kale, find any way where we can administer that to the taxes, that would be great, but this is just too broad.
So, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
if the motion would pass right now, it would go back to the original version, which this would be under a cubic yard likely, what was in the alleyway before. And that would be then something that we would not impose a fee for. Just like shoveling that stuff off the alleyway would be something that we would not impose a fee, it's under a cubic yard.
So, and Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and yeah, Hale, what I would say is, at another time, come back to us with something that says an ordinance saying your garbage has to be tidy and all together and not necessarily contained. I think that, airtight containers, that's not practical. I don't want an airtight container. But we can always address it later. We don't have to address this tonight.
So that would be coming, I already have it, the Grisham amendment. So we would address all of that at a later date,
If we wanted to.
if we want to.
There's no rush.
I know there's a motion on the floor and seconded. Okay, so we're going with ordinance to consolidate 2024-0043. That's what is on the floor right now with a motion and a second.
To place it on file, to deny the motion. Well, to deny the item.
To deny the item or place place on file?
Same thing.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to place on file. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any further business to come before this committee?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Yeah, right. Or the,
Daddy daughter.
another thing,
Has
the commercial issue.
choir and I don't have council tonight, so.
There
Daddy daughter.
I love that.
Yeah. That's particularly Swan's point is that, well, they'll come tomorrow anyhow.
Yeah, and I got that business, yeah, I know that guy, I'll see him on the afternoon.
Hey, Dan. I would love to get that number and figure out where the house is supposed to be.
We never
had it done.
The amendment was.
Right, we kind of, at some point we should have. In my neighborhood.
Right. I think the answer is that, again, automate. How do we make it, if that's how you really feel, how do we say? Placing service? I could go to whatever small, whatever. But I'm trying to.
Automated collection, pick up that.
It's not, right. That's just one. And people are gonna be stuck with that, and it's gonna sit there. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Touching the bag. You see it when you're solar market street. Even on a daily basis, I have cards where there's half full cart, and you still have stuff outside your cart. I keep it, it's under a yard, I can't pay whatever, Fisher Express that. Do I know it's terrible or not? I don't know, that's what's broken things. I have to have paper language or residents that there's something in there that's not gonna come back. That is something. Right. I live in this, have you ever driven in a community? Oh, yeah. So I'm kind of thinking if we do that. If I can have my. There's no way I'm gonna cover everything. I'd be so happy, but I have.
So it's kind of like.
I should have set that up for everybody, but you look just on what the comment what everything would be. Not that we're gonna expect that.
But yeah, it's
But you know,
right.
it's not nonsense, you know,
But
that's
that's
what
a good list, so we could say. These are items like.
Is the
I think
game-
60%.
Meeting's still going?
Which is, I stopped, I left the meeting,
Oh,
on average,